I want to read a verse. Hebrews 11, verse 1 says, "Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen." Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The Amplified Version says this, says, "Now faith is the assurance. It's the title deed. It's the confirmation of things hoped for that are divinely guaranteed. And the evidence of things not seen. The conviction of their reality." Faith comprehends, listen to this statement, faith comprehends as fact what cannot be experienced by the physical senses. Faith looks at something that can't be seen and says it's fact. Let me ask you a question this morning. How many of you have seen the promises of God fulfilled in your life? Amen. How many of you have seen some promises of God not manifested in your life? Amen. I've been in ministry quite a while. I have Bible school and degrees and all that jazz. And I come across these situations in my ministry where I can't answer why they haven't seen the manifestation of what God promised in their life sometimes. And it's kind of frustrating because I'd like to be able to just give them an answer. I'd like to blame it on them. I'd be like, well, if you'd tithe more. Have you heard of Teruma? If you had more faith, if you spent more time in the Word, whatever it is. But those answers really kind of fall flat. And there's situations that you're going to run across in your Christianity where there's really not a good answer. And so the question becomes, how do you kind of deal with those situations? How do you deal with those situations? And the title of my message today is how to deal with the delay. How to deal with the delay. Because it all starts, it's going to get real simple here. I know y'all are real smart and everything, but we're going to get real simple here. It all starts with a promise. Faith begins where the will of God's known. So you have to have a promise from God for there to be faith. Okay? If you don't have a promise from God and you're just believing for a pink Cadillac because you look good in a pink Cadillac, you're just wishing, okay? But if God says you're going to have a pink Cadillac, He's not, because you're going to look silly in a pink Cadillac. But if not, if He says you can have it, then you can stand on faith. Whatever the promise of God, you've got to start there. So the starting point is faith and a promise, is a promise. The ending point is the manifestation. But that scripture says that faith has to be in something that's not seen. So once there's a manifestation, there's no necessity for faith. Once I have the thing that God promised me, I don't need faith anymore because I have it. But a little bit later in this chapter, he says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. So here's what I want you to get to understand is that instead of always kind of just waiting for the manifestation of the promise, learn to deal with the delay, because that's where faith's at and that's where we please God at. You're going to walk out of here and you're going to be like, God, I've been believing for it. You take your time because I'm going to grow deeper in my relationship with you. See, in that delay is where you connect with God. Can I just say this? If you don't have an area where you're standing on faith, if you don't have a promise and something you're believing God to do, then your relationship's going to grow stagnant because you can't do anything without faith when it comes to God. You need to be in a situation where you're waiting, expecting, and believing God to do something great. That's a great place to be. I want you to not only, see, oftentimes we get in that place and we start to go, why isn't it happening? Or what's this and what's that? And we sort of dread it. We begin to dread that delay. We begin to just kind of crawl through it. But once you begin to understand that that's the place of faith and faith pleases God, then what can happen is I can begin to prosper in the delay. I can begin to look at that time between the promise and the manifestation and realize this is a good place to be. I can rejoice in that place because that's the area and the place where I grow closer to God. Now, we make this Christian cliche. We're like, God, I don't want just your hands. I want your face. And it's great. We're saying, God, it's not just about the things you can give me, but I want you. But if that's true, you should love the delay. If that's true, you should be like, take your time, God. Do I want the promises of God to manifest in my life? Yes. And they will. But I don't want to always kind of live for the manifestation. It's kind of like living for the weekend. If you're living for the weekend, there's 5 days you're just wasting. I think a way to explain is I'm not really that way. People will say, it's all about the journey. I don't believe that. I want to get to where I'm going. I'm like, if we could teleport, Star Trek that baby and just get me from here to there, right? I don't want a road trip with you, okay? I don't want a road trip with me. I just want to get to where we're going. But when it comes to our walk with God, when it comes to dealing with the delay, the road trip's where it's at. The road trip is where you get to spend some quality time with Jesus. It's where you get to listen to all that music from the 80s and eat junk food. We love the road trip with Jesus. But if you're just going to sit in the car and be angry because you're not there, you're missing out on what God wants to do. So how do I deal with the delay? How do I deal with the fact that God promised it and it didn't happen when I thought it should happen? See, here's the crazy thing is God is perfectly capable to manifest the promises 2 seconds. But he doesn't. Because he knows that in the delay is where you meet him. He knows that when you deepen it in your faith, that's what pleases him. So how do I deal with the delay? I changed my perspective. I began to look at it differently. The other day, I heard about somebody that had healed from this thing that they'd been praying for a long time, and I'd been praying for them, and not as long as they had, but I'd been praying for a long time for it. And they came up to me, and they're like, I'm healed from it. And I'm like, really? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, that's awesome. And so later that time, the next day, I got alone with God, and I was like, okay, so they've been dealing with this for years. Like, why now? I mean, I'm thankful, but why now? And you know what I heard? Nothing. He didn't tell me. But he said, what needs to change when you're thinking about the manifestation and dealing with that delay is your perspective of it. Rabbi Landry, he did, last time we were down in Nicaragua, it was the night of the crusade. And before the crusade, we gathered at the team house. And he said something, and I've heard him say this before, but it hit me that night, probably just kind of clicked with me that night. He said, when you lay hands on people and you pray for them, your job is to lay hands on them and to believe God that they'll be healed. He goes, after that, you're not in charge of anything else. He said something, he says, I don't celebrate when people get healed, and I don't celebrate when they don't get healed. I don't get discouraged when they don't get healed, because it's not my job. My job is the delay. My job is just to do what he told me to do in faith. See, I lay hands on you and you don't get healed. I'm like, what have I done? What's wrong with me? But he don't, because getting people healed isn't his job. His job's to simply believe and lay hands on the sick. He's learned perspective. He's learned to deal with the delay. How do I deal with the delay? It's a change in perspective. How do I get perspective? I get it from the presence of God. Here's what I mean. We sometimes get this idea that if we come into the presence of God, all our problems are going to go away. I just want to go ahead and burst your bubble now. It's not. I heard a preacher say it like this. I thought it was really funny. He said, when you come to church and you forget to make your bed, he said, when you go back, angels aren't going to go and make your bed for you, and you're going to walk in and your bed's going to be made. It doesn't work like that. The problems you walked in here are going to be out there when you walk back out. I really think when I think about talking to somebody when they're getting saved, I'm like, congratulations, your life's about to be a living hell. Welcome to the family. Oh, it's about to get rough. See, because you've now ticked off Satan. He didn't even notice you before, but now you're about to face it. We should put that on the sign. Really draw them in. Come get saved. It's going to be horrible. Bless you. We get this concept that if I just spend time in the presence of God, all my problems will go away. And I begin to understand something. My problems don't go away. My perspective changes. How I look at the situation changes in the presence of God. Do you notice what happened here? And as I watch your faces, it's kind of fun to sit up here, and I watch your faces, and when you start the service, everything in the world's on your mind. Everything you're struggling with and everything you're going. But then when Jonathan opens his mouth on that last song, he goes, oh, what a Savior. Suddenly, you just saw people go, your problem didn't change. Your family's still a pain in the neck. You still didn't put anything in the crock pot for lunch. But suddenly you don't care. Because your perspective changes in the presence of God. See, perspective is super important. I was reading in Exodus chapter 1. They won't put it up there because I didn't tell them to. But in Exodus chapter 1, all Israel has moved to Egypt, and there's about 70 of them, of the family of Israel, of the Hebrews, and they're there. And it says, Abraham and all of them had died, and all the sons had died. So Joseph's generation was gone. And they were growing and they were multiplying in Egypt. The Hebrews were breeding like rabbits. It was like the Day family. It was awesome. Okay? And they're having tons of kids, and they're growing and they're prospering. And it says that the Pharaoh at that time didn't know Joseph. And so Pharaoh saw that this group of people that weren't Egyptians, that were prospering and multiplying, and he said, I've got to do something to stop this. We've got to deal shrewdly. So he made them slaves. And he put them to work. But the scripture says this. It says, the more that they oppressed them, the more they multiplied. And I could sit outside and read that one chapter from the point of view of God. And what I saw was the covenant of Abraham being fulfilled in that chapter. Because he said, I'm going to multiply your descendants. I saw the promise of God in that chapter. And I'm like, that's awesome. But then I thought about that poor bugger, that 22-year-old that's out there in the bricks getting beat trying to make a brick. And I thought, does he see that the covenant of God's being fulfilled? Probably not. He's probably just seeing the oppression. He's probably just seeing it. And I thought, boy, if he could just look at it from where I'm seeing it, he'd rejoice. But the same thing happens to us, is that our perspective gets so down into the weeds of things, gets so into the middle of the brick, that we can't step back and begin to recognize that God's in the middle of this situation. That in the middle of the delay, God hasn't left. He's not slept. He's not given up. But he's still moving forward in his promises. But all I see is the bricks. So what happens is when I spend time in the presence of God, I begin to back up. Pastors preach that says, where are we seated? We're seated in heavenly places with Jesus Christ. We're seated at the right hand. So when I'm from up there, I suddenly begin to see him working. But that only happens in the presence of God. When you spend time in the presence of God, the perspective changes. What's different about Cross Life Church? You guys still have problems like every other people in town, but your perspective's different because you've spent time in the presence of God. To have a different perspective, you've got to have persistence. 1 Kings chapter 18, talking about Elijah. He just did the whole standoff with the prophets of Baal. And I love the Bible. Like, he literally took the 400 and some prophets down to the river and he chopped off their heads. That's ministry right there. I'm like, hey, Lord, bring it on. That's good stuff. Okay, that's a pretty cool story, right? And then it says this. It says, Elijah said to Ahab, Go up and eat and drink, for there is the sound of the abundance of rain. See, there had been a drought in the land. But he says to Ahab, the king, he says, go up and eat and drink, for there's the sound of the abundance of rain. Let me tell you something. Oh, this will preach. But you're going to hear the rain before you see the rain. You'll hear it before you ever see it. You're going to hear the promises of God before you ever see them. The issue is, are you as convinced of the sound as you are of the sight? So he says, go up and eat and drink, for there's the sound of the abundance of rain. So Ahab went up to eat and drink, and Elijah went up to the top of Carmel. Then he bowed down on the ground. He put his face between his knees. And he said to his servant, go up now, look towards the sea. So he went up and he looked, and he said, there's nothing. Elijah's saying to him, saying, it's going to rain. I heard the sound of rain. Now go look and see if it's coming. And he goes out there, and he doesn't see a thing. And so he sends him out again 7 times. Go look again. Go look again. Go look again. It's like when I was a kid and I'm trying to find something in the fridge. Mom would be like, look again. It's in there. No. Go look again. Time after time, that servant went out and all he saw was clear skies. And he comes back and he goes, dude, you missed it on this one. There's nothing out there. Elijah says, go look again. The 7th time it came to pass that he said, there is a cloud as small as a man's hand rising out of the sea. So he said, go up to Ahab, prepare your chariots to go down before the rain stops you. Do you know how many times in that period of delay that God's saying, go look again? And we're like, I don't think it's going to happen. And he says, go look one more time. Go look again. Go look again. Go look again. So many times we're just on the edge. We're ready for that miracle to come and we give up. And God's saying, go look again. Go look again. And what I love it is when he went out, he saw the cloud the size of a man's hand. Now, I'm not sure if there really was a cloud the size of a man or it was one of those. But he saw something that was just a hint of God's promise. And he's like, it's coming. He went ahead and acted as if God's promises were true. I want to tell you, if you'll keep looking, you're going to see the cloud the size of a man's hand. Your promise is just on the horizon. And all you've got to do is go, let's get ready. It's going to rain. But to keep the perspective, I got to keep persisting. I don't know about you, but I forget. I forget. Why is it so important to spend time in the presence of God? Why is it so important to spend time every day? Because if I pray in the morning, I'm kind of short-sighted, and I forget by noontime. And so I have to come back and go, God, change my perspective again. I have to keep coming back and going, God, help me to see this. Because when I get in the midst of it, it seems to be all I see is my issue. It seems to be all I see. But when I get into his presence time and time again, he forces my eyes up to look unto him and see that, hey, it's going to be all right. I'm telling you, some of you, you've had some promises from God that you've looked 5 times and you're about to give up. I'm telling you, look again. There's some of you, you've looked once and you're like, oh, ain't gonna happen. Shut up. Look again. There's some of you, oh, if you'd look one more time. One more time. How long is the delay? I really don't know. I read a preacher the other day. I was reading one of his books, and he said, when you're praying for things, really everything that you pray for should happen in 30 days. I'm like, I should read the rest of his book because I apparently have missed out on something here. That's awesome. Like Abraham, if he'd have known that, he could have got things done a lot quicker. There's sometimes I've seen God do things like that. There's times I've prayed for something to happen in here, and I walk out and God does it, and that's great. But there are a lot of things in my life that I've prayed for years. There's a lot of things that I've sought God after for a long time. There's a lot of things that you've gone after God and you said, Lord, you promised this. When's it coming? Look again. Don't give up now. To have perspective, I need people. The 25th of last month was the launch of Little Rock, and Tiffany and Mordecai and I went up the night before to stay up there, and we drove up, and we had some stuff to haul, so we took our truck. Now, my truck is an F-150 Super Cab with 230,000 miles on it. That's a good truck. She's got character. She's pretty, no matter what you say. So we don't typically drive her out of El Dorado because she has 230,000 miles on her. But I needed to haul stuff up and thought, she's been doing good. So we hopped in the truck and we went up there and we're dropping off some stuff at the storage place for the church. Got a storage building up there to store our church in during the week. And we're up there and we're dropping off some stuff. And the Mausers are up there, Terry and Kathy, and they're helping us unload. And then they leave and we're like, yeah, we're right behind you. We're going to head to the hotel. And they leave and I hop in the truck and I'm like, well, that's interesting. Because this thing fires up every time. I mean, she's a beautiful truck. I mean, every time you just think about starting, and she's like, oh, I'm all for it. But I turned that key, and she cranked all she could, but there was no firing. And so I'm a pastor, and I'm full of faith. So I prayed. I said, Dear Jesus, I need you to heal my truck. Now, this isn't a time for delay because I got places to be. So I need a miracle here. We're not talking about one of these long healings. I need you to touch this truck. I was full of faith. I was a man of God. And I took that key and I put it in there and I turned and it went, And so I laid my feet on it. And I got a little more aggressive in my prayer. And said, you stupid piece of junk truck. What is wrong with you? It was hot. It was hot that day. It's 5:30. I have a pregnant wife, very pregnant wife. And I have a toddler. And there's no AC. And it's hot. And so I go into just good old-fashioned panic mode. Because all I saw was I'm in Little Rock at 5:30, so there's not a mechanic open. Like Saturday evening, there's no mechanics. I don't know really where I'm at. I don't know anybody in Little Rock. And I'm like, what do I do? And so I get an Uber. I get a taxi, and I get him in there, and we get him to the hotel. And I walk into the hotel, and there's Terry Mauser, and he'd already heard about my truck because I texted Chester and Mark and said, hey, got any ideas? And so they'd already told him. I get to the hotel, and he says, why didn't you call me? Like, I'm right there, literally like a minute away. He says, we just left. And I realized something. I said to him, I was just so frustrated. All I could see was my broken down truck. Instead of realizing that there were people that could help me. So him and Kaya in Spain, we jump in the truck. I know nothing about trucks at all. I just know you turn the key, they go vroom, and you drive, right? But Kaya and Mr. T, they're men, and so they know things about trucks, right? So we hop in there, and we go over, and they tap on things and push things, and I think they're just faking it, to be totally honest with you. But I'm so hopeful, hey, somebody's in the midst of this with me. Because you know what? When you're struggling with something, it's kind of nice to not be by yourself. Even if I'm not really convinced they know what they're doing. They're not here. They aren't going to hear this, so it's all right. But they're looking, and I did that. I looked in there. I don't know why guys do that, lift the hood and look in there. You're like, is it still there? Yes, there's still an engine. Okay. Guess that's not it. check. And so I got some other guys, and we looked in there, and it was still there. Still an engine. But they tap, and they beat on things, and they try things, and I'm a little less frustrated, but I'm still kind of upset because I'm a little stressed out about the launch the next day. I'm a little freaked out about that, and I'm just, just kind of a little bit of pressure, but it's cool they're there. And Cayenne says something to me. I love Cayenne. He's a great guy. And he says to me, he goes, well, I guess there's a mechanic in town who needs to know about Jesus. I thought, I want to punch you. Why don't you break down your vehicle and you tell him about Jesus? Maybe you could have broke down my vehicle at the mechanics. But after he said that, and him and Mr. T and I gathered around and we prayed for that truck, I got a little perspective. And I thought, you know what? In less than 24 hours, we're launching Cross Life Church Little Rock, something I've been dreaming about. It has 230,000 miles, and you just drove it 2.5 hours. It's tired. Would you just relax and not be a big deal? Now, I'd really like to finish up this story telling you I led the mechanic to Jesus. I didn't. I went to a place called Christian Brothers, so I assumed they were Christians. I didn't even ask. After he gave me a quote, I was like, do you even know Jesus? I prayed. I was like, God, this is a great illustration, but the ending is lacking because nothing came of it. I just paid to get my truck fixed and drove it home the next week. Like, I didn't lead Little Rock to Jesus. I didn't anything. Like, no angels came and lifted it up and hauled it to the mechanics. And nothing good, like nothing. But you know what came out of that? A really expensive lesson on perspective. You need to be smarter than me. It'll cost you less. This is free, okay? Pay attention. You need people around you to help you get perspective. There's a tendency when you get into a jam, when you get into a problem, to want to isolate yourself. I don't know what it is, but there's something about we just want to not deal with it with other people. But God puts you in the middle of a body of believers who are happy to drive over there and look and see if the engine's still in it with you. Now, here's the crazy thing, is the people that are around you probably aren't going to have an answer. But you know what they are going to have? The ability to give you some perspective. And to be able to go, dude, it's just a truck, relax. You know what I learned from that weekend? So I'm without a ride and I have errands to run, and so I'm like calling, and Lacey and Jonathan let me borrow their van, and we ran our errands. You know what I learned that weekend? I learned that I have a lot of really good people in my life that care about me. I have a lot of people that didn't just be like, oh, sucker, your truck broke, good luck. You're surrounded by a bunch of people that love you. And no matter what the situation you're dealing with, you're not alone. Pastor Mark made a statement the other day, and I rebuked him. And then I listened to him. But he said he just got done dealing with some financial things. He didn't tell me what the counseling was, but he says, if people would if they were going to spend more than $500, they should come talk to me first. And I'm like, you dictator? We don't do that. That's not how we run Cross Life Church. Like, you can spend whatever. It's your money. Spend it how you want, okay? You don't have to get Pastor Mark's permission. But then I thought, he's got a really good point, because he's not in the middle of the situation. And so he has some perspective. About a week before my truck broke down, I told him, I said, I'm going to buy a new truck. He said, you're about to have a baby. You should wait till after the baby. Not a good time to get in some debt right before you have a baby. The day my truck broke down, I texted him and said, you're wrong! You are so wrong! But you know what? He was really right. The ability to hear somebody else who's not in that situation go, it's going to be all right. I know you're struggling. I know you seem like all you can see is straw and bricks. But God's right in the middle of where you're at. You know, it's a humorous situation now about my truck. But the reality is that the promises that some of you are waiting on, the delays that some of you are dealing with, they're real deals. I don't know how many times I've sat down with somebody who's dealing with cancer or had a loved one die. Just recently, we had to go and do a visit at Children's in Little Rock. I hate that place. I love that place. It's a great hospital. I highly recommend it. But now that I'm a father, seeing a kid my age struggling with what they're struggling with, it causes me to question a lot of things about God. It causes me to not understand everything He's doing. Some of you are dealing with situations I can't even fathom. And some of you are dealing with some situations really aren't that big of a deal, but you're so far down in it you can't see out of it. So what happens when you can't get perspective? What happens when you come into the presence of God, it's all you think about is the problem you're dealing with? What happens when you can't see light at the end of the tunnel? I only have one answer for you. Look unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. There's a great country song that fits this situation perfectly. It says, when you're going through hell, keep on going. You didn't know country music was so theologically sound, did you? Whatever you're facing today, you've got to know something. God loves you. He's got you. I don't have an answer why you're struggling with what you're struggling with. I don't know why. But God said something to me the other day that shook my world. He said, Matt, no matter what you're dealing with, you have to trust my heart. But God, why would you let that happen? I know you don't understand. Just trust my heart. See, I have good things for you. I have your best interest in mind. I don't know why you're facing what you're facing, but I'm going to tell you, you serve a God that's faithful. And He says that His word is true. And let every man be a liar, but His word is true. Whatever situation you're facing this morning, you're going to win. You're going to get through it. You're going to be victorious because He's victorious. But don't give up. Look again. Remind yourself again of the goodness of God. There's a verse in the Amplified. Hebrews 11:3, Jim, I think, in the Amplified. Is that up there? There we go. Go back to 2. Can you do that? I gave you 3, but I was just kidding about that. He's got it. It's good. Just chill. You're fine. This is not the delay's fine, okay? Dig the delay. Feel closer to Jesus. Have a little praise break. Yep, I don't know where I'm at. That's all right. Not his fault. Somewhere in the Amplified Bible, I have degrees, you know. Somewhere in the Amplified Bible, it defines faith as trusting in the goodness of God. I can find it for you later if you don't believe me. You want to please God? Trust God. You want to watch your relationship with God. See, there's something about people that they aren't believing God for anything. Their relationship grows stagnant. I want every person in this place to be in the middle of the delay. Because that's where he says this. He says, I draw near to the brokenhearted. That's where he says, I'll never leave you nor forsake you. That's where he says, I'm a good, good Father. In the middle of your delay. So you know what's going to be different about Cross Life Church? We're going to rejoice in the delay. We're going to be like, God, there's no big rush. I know you promised make me a millionaire, but I'm digging this right now. God, I know you promised healing, but I'm all right here. And I'm still believing. And I'm still trusting. Stand up on your feet. Here it is. Hebrews 11, verse 3 says, by faith, maybe it's not a Hebrews 11:3, I could have made that up too. It says, by faith, that is with an inherent trust and enduring confidence in the power, wisdom, and goodness of God. An inherent trust and enduring confidence in the power, wisdom, and goodness of God. I don't know why you're facing what you're facing, but I'm telling you, he's a good God, and it's going to be all right.